Hello again. This is the video you need to watch once you've had a go at worksheet 1, looking at bits and pieces from the Haydn finale. You probably found it a bit tricky. It's a few tricky corners I've chosen to look at. So the point of this video is just to talk you through the various complexities that are there. They're mostly to do with the harmony and cadences and all that sort of thing. So I'm going to talk you through those here, so hopefully you'll have a much better understanding of what's going on in S2B, the second subject, and as Haydn goes into the recapitulation. They're two of the trickiest harmonic moments, harmonic and tonal moments in the movement, and once we've cracked them, next week we can get on with looking at some of the actually more straightforward things that are happening in the development and in the recapitulation. So the idea is that I will show you some stuff from the score. I'll play you some examples both on the tracks and on the piano, a bit like as if we were in class. Probably a little bit less hectic and a bit more organised than in class, but hopefully it will give you some sort of explanation that will help you make some notes in your own scores and be able to really understand what's going on. So I suggest you pause the video in between explanations, make sure you make good notes on your score. You can always check on the annotated score afterwards and just make sure you build up a really good understanding of the two passages that we're going to look at today. So the first bit we're going to look at is the lead into and the beginning of the second subject, S2B. So if you could find that bit in your scores, and then you'll be ready to watch the next part of the video. It's the slow bit around bar 83, 84, where it suddenly goes into minims. In bar 83, Haydn ends on an E7 chord, an E dominant 7th chord, 5 in A major. And we'd expect that, obviously, to resolve to 1. Now, it's a very common gesture in classical music to, instead of resolving a chord 5 like that to 1, interrupting it by going to 6, an interrupted cadence. And that's sort of what Haydn does here. So you would expect that to go from chord 5 to chord 6, like this. But Haydn has another set of surprises and delays up his sleeve. So instead of landing on an ordinary F sharp minor chord, which is what chord 6 would be, he lands on this chord instead. Which is much more surprising than... So the difference in bar 84 is that we've got an A sharp and an E, an added 7th as well. So what we've actually got is a new dominant 7th chord, an F sharp dominant 7th chord, which implies B minor. And that's in fact where he goes next. So we have the F sharp dominant 7th in bar 84 and 5. And then in bar 86 we go to B minor. And that turns out to be part of a perfectly ordinary circle of fifths. In fact, back through an E chord in bar 88 and 89 to more or less chord 1 in bar 90, an A major chord. Although actually he blurs that a bit with some passing minims in the inner parts. So it actually goes like this. And so he defers really resolving it really well until a little bit later, in fact. But the main thing that's going on here is bar 83 dominant 7th, and then this very unusual interrupted cadence that is a secondary dominant. And as in the worksheet I asked you to look at, in bar 85 there's an extra note again before it resolves where he adds this G. So we've got a dominant 7th chord like this. Adds that G natural, which makes it a really scrunchy added minor ninth instead. So all sorts of things going on there to really delay the resolution of that original dominant seventh in bar 83. Instead of that, and so on it goes. So now let's listen to the whole sequence that we've just been talking about. So now we're going to have a quick look at the recapitulation on pages 83 and 4. At the end of the development, Haydn has got more interrupted cadence fun up his sleeve. So normally you would expect at the end of a development section for there to be a really clear dominant in the home key. So we're going back to D major here, so you would expect perhaps an A dominant seventh, ready to resolve on to D, and etc. But that's not the chord that Haydn's on at the end of the development. In fact, at bar 185, he's in the wrong key altogether. He's doing this. I asked you to look at this in the worksheet, and you probably noticed that there are E sharps in there, and those E sharps in fact mean that we are in F sharp minor, because E sharp's the sharpest sharp, and we're hanging around on the dominant of that key. So at the end of page 83, bar 185 to the end of the page, we've got what sounds like gearing up for perfect cadence in F sharp minor. And then presumably he's going to resolve to 1. What he actually does is a really bit of devilish cunning. So he's sitting on this C sharp chord 5, and just like before, instead of getting chord 1, we get chord 6. So it resolves to a D major chord, because chord 6 in minor keys is always major. So it goes like this. So that's all pretty typical classical stuff again, using interrupted cadences. But the cunning thing here is that that D major chord that he's landed on is in fact the tonic. We're back at the recapitulation. So rather than going there from an ordinary dominant, so from an A dominant, what he does instead is he's hanging around on this dominant of F sharp minor. There, we have an interrupted cadence onto D instead. So he's really messing around with our expectations. Really vintage late Haydn, getting his lulls in the last movement there, just going into the recapitulation. And then there's one more thing worth noticing about page 83, and that's the chords that I asked you to look at the end of the worksheet. So if we look back first at 180, 4, 3, 2, 1, on the top line, 181, we've got a D sharp in the bottom, then an F sharp in the viola, then an A, then a C natural held over from a few bars ago. So this is basically the chord. And you may have worked out that's a D sharp diminished seventh. But instead of resolving it normally upwards by semitone, where we would expect perhaps to E, instead he gets rid of his D sharp, so he takes the diminished seventh chords and he lowers the D sharp to a D natural in bar 183. So now we have what seems like a D dominant seventh. But what you probably didn't spot, unless you were really, really on the ball, is that what happens to that chord is that it's not used as a D dominant seventh, which we would expect to resolve to G. Instead, it's treated as if it was a D augmented sixth, which would be D to B sharp, although here it's spelled as a C natural. And those two notes resolve outwards to the dominant of F sharp minor, the C sharp that we were talking about before. So that's just another little sequence of harmonic surprises. So just to recap, bar 181 is a D sharp diminished seventh chord, and then he changes that, resolves it unexpectedly to a D dominant seventh chord in 183, but that turns out to be actually a D augmented sixth chord that resolves outwards to C sharp, and initially it's actually a 6/4 chord, a cadential 6/4 chord, but it does eventually resolve to a C sharp major chord, which is what leads us back into the development, into the recapitulation in a second. So more messing about from Haydn just before the recap there. So I hope that's made things a little bit clearer. Quite a lot of complicated things to get your head around there. Watch the video a couple of times if that helps. Look at the annotated score and make sure you've got everything written clearly in your score. What I'd then like you to do, please, for the end of the week, is I would like you to write me just about half a page or so on a Word document or similar that just explains Haydn's use of interrupted cadences in the finale of the Symphony 104 as we've seen them so far. So just a sort of a reasonably detailed explanation showing how he uses interrupted cadences to sort of create dramatic effect and surprise and keep us on our toes at the various points in this symphony. So that hopefully will make your understanding clearer, getting you to do that. And the other thing I'd like you to do before I set the musical theatre work later in the week is have a little go at the dictation and wider listening exercise, which is now on Moodle as well. So I hope that's plenty to keep you busy, perhaps a little bit more than you need to keep you busy really, but you've got quite a lot of time on your hands in these weird lockdown times. So take care, stay safe, and I hope you can get through that work. If you've got any problems, do email me or go onto the Moodle forum and ask any questions there. I'll be really pleased to hear your questions and try and deal with them as best I can.